Welcome back to another episode of Front Row Cinema, a movie podcast for movie lovers by movie lovers. I am your host, TJ Trimboli, and with me, as always, is my co-host, Jedi Master, Mr. James O'Reilly.
They have given me the rank of master, but I am not allowed on the council.
He is not on the council, which is why he's sitting in with us today. And each week we run down a movie from my 1,000 movies in theaters, and we see how well it's aged, along with the hype, its box office analysis, and legacy in the film industry. And I can think of no better movie that encompasses those feats than our film tonight. Jim, what are we watching?
Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace.
Oh, yeah, none other than 1999's biggest movie. Some would say the biggest franchise of all time, Star Wars. Directed by George Lucas, stars Ewan McGregor, Liam Neeson, and Natalie Portman. Set 32 years before the original trilogy, the plot follows Jedi Master Qui-Gon Jinn and his apprentice Obi-Wan Kenobi as they try to protect Queen Padme Amidala of Naboo in hopes of securing a peaceful end to an interplanetary trade dispute. Joined by Anakin Skywalker, a young slave with unusually strong natural powers of the Force, they simultaneously contend with the mysterious return of the Sith. That is so much more of a mouthful than I ever thought it would be to describe the plot of that movie. But as always, before we dive into these movies, we like to ask ourselves what we remember about seeing these movies in theaters. Jim, what do you remember? Well, first off, did you see Star Wars in theaters? These movies we've been going on recently, you've been bowed out of. I'm hoping you've seen
I
in theaters at
I
least.
don't remember. The only thing I remember about this movie, from when it originally came out when I was a kid, I know that I saw it at some point. I don't know if it was in theaters. I remember at Blockbuster, they
Mhm.
had this sweet like double red lightsaber with that came with gum inside of it. And that's what I remember about this movie was
What do you
that thing
remember?
was so cool, and me and my younger brother used to fight with it all the time.
Amazing. He doesn't
So
remember the
yeah, that's
toys,
all
but
I got for you. Sorry, sorry, not sorry.
he doesn't remember the movie, but remembers the memorabilia. Were your brothers hip on Star Wars? Was this a movie you were able to be cool with because they were
Yeah,
down with?
I mean, like for a lot of this time period, right? My older brothers are very influential, and I remember that they thought this movie was pretty trash.
Yeah, they were not big fans of 90s epic cinema, we've learned in these few episodes so far.
Yeah. Although, like, I don't think a lot of people, like older people, really liked this movie much at all. Honestly, I
That's
think
true.
that it's
We will get deep into it with the critical reception to this movie, but yeah, a lot of the people that grew up at least on the original trilogy were not big fans of the prequel era Star
right. But
Wars.
I don't want to get too far ahead. So, what do you remember about it?
So I do. This was one of the movies I do have a clear idea of in my head of going to see it. My dad took me and young crazy Zach to go see this movie in theaters. I remember waiting on a crazy line to go in and get tickets for it and watch it, and everybody being just crazy dressed up and everything. And it was like one of the first times I could remember be feeling like you were a part of like this crazy fandom. Like it was the first time I had gone to the movies and it felt like an event. Like normally when you're a
Yeah,
kid,
yeah,
like going to see Titanic or Lost World or anything like that, it was like when you drove up, you got a ticket, you sat in, you watched it. Like this was the first time that I felt like going to the movies was this like larger than life communal experience.
yeah. Like, there's like a much deeper cultural impact there.
Yeah, so I couldn't even tell you any memories of like how I felt about the movie itself, but that was
Yeah,
something that
and
always stuck with me was that whole experience of waiting on the line to go in and everyone's like in their robes and their fake lightsaber fighting outside and as like they came out what 1999, so we were what 9 years old, like or 10, about to
yeah,
turn 10,
yeah.
like that's a crazy, core memory right there. That's just like something you're like, dude, this is wild.
Yeah, well, and it's weird too because like that's like the first movie that I remember like even as like a kid, I feel like I understood the cultural impact of it because I had seen the original trilogy movies so many times. Like before this even came out. Like that was like we used to watch those on VHS all the time, me and my siblings. So,
Yeah, well, that was a big it's funny, I feel like our generation, or at least our age bracket of, the millennials, is we are kind of like dipped into both toes, in the sense that we're old enough to remember growing up and watching the original trilogy and that being all there was to watch and like living or
Yeah.
dying by it. But we were also young enough to like have these positive responses to the prequel trilogies as well. Because you'll get some of the older people that have seen
Right.
the prequel trilogy and will shit on those to the day they die. And then you have people in our generation who are much more lenient and receptive to the prequel trilogy while also loving the original trilogy. And now we're kind of those old people with the sequel trilogy where we're just like, nah.
Yeah, I mean, we
We're
probably don't want to. I don't want to get into the sequel
no,
trilogy
we
because
we will not
I did kind of like the Last Jedi.
we will not dive too much into those ones. It might be like generalities of the wider Star Wars scope as we go, so we won't try and brush
Yeah,
too
I
much on.
mean,
But we
I
are
guess
kind of
we'll get to them eventually, right? We did see those in theaters,
it's
so
true. We did see all those in theaters, so eventually they will come to pass. But we will try to keep those ones more on the outliers here and stick mostly to the Phantom Menace. But yeah, we're kind of like now the outside people looking in for the sequel trilogy. So it'll be interesting to see how kids of the sequel trilogy era will respond as they get older and see how that
yeah. I mean,
reception
I'm
goes
sure they love it because
for
well,
those
who
ones as
wouldn't?
it goes. Hopefully, we'll
But
see.
anyway, sorry, I'm getting us a little off track here.
Yeah, right. You're throwing us all over the place. Some fun trivia that I want to throw at you. This is that I decided how I wanted to pivot myself here because as we started these with the earlier episodes, we were really just throwing down any type of production stuff we wanted to talk about. And then after
Sure.
last week's episode with the Rugrats, where we had that hilarious tidbit about Tara Strong and her amazing ability to make women lactate, I thought instead of just
Oh yeah.
doing straight production trivia, I am just going to bring forth some of the trivia that I think is peculiar like that, that stands out. And I feel like those are much funnier. And I have two of them here for you that I think
Okay.
are obviously not to the level of Tara Strong's ability to lactate women, but I think these are two solid ones. And the first one that I came across, which I actually did not know about this and was one that I kind of want to live in an alternate reality where it is so I could see it, is Michael Jackson himself campaigned to play Jar Jar Binks
I didn't know that.
to the
I didn't
point
think
that
it could be
George Luke,
worse, but
yeah, right. And I was reading something too where like George Lucas like took Natalie Portman and I think somebody else to like one of Michael Jackson's concerts.
oh
And then Michael
boy.
Jackson afterwards
Yeah,
was like
that's
talking about like, yeah, I really want to play Jar Jar. It's like, can you
in
just
hindsight.
imagine being on set and Michael Jackson's just heing his way through Jar Jar Binks?
I can't get past the fact that George Lucas brought like children to his concert to meet him. That's like that's
Also, like
it's a
imagine
bit
that, like
dicey.
you're like Natalie Portman, like you're about to like be in the biggest movie of all time. And you're like, oh, what are you doing tonight? You're just like, oh, George Lucas is taking me to the Michael Jackson concert.
Yeah, ooh man. I mean, I've heard this about Hollywood, but Jesus.
Yeah, right. Talk about grooming. My God.
No, so yeah, I mean, I don't know. I couldn't imagine it. It sounds horrible.
It
Like,
sounds
and I
like
already
could
hated
you
that
just
part.
imagine like he'd be like Misa Oki Day? He
I don't. It'd be pretty wild. I like. Do you think he'd lean into it that hard?
oh,
Like he wouldn't drop like the Michael Jackson persona at all.
I mean, if you're getting Michael Jackson, like
Yeah, I
you're
guess
not
that's
gonna
what you're
not have
hiring him
him. Yeah,
for,
you're
right? Like if
not
you're,
gonna have him Michael Jackson all over the place, right?
yeah.
Like Jar Jar just starts doing like crazy dance moves, like in the fight
Well,
scenes. Like
right.
he's like
That's why
moonwalking.
you're hiring him, right? So he can like moonwalk and stuff. That's definitely why you would go that route.
He's just moonwalking all over the droid because you're just like, what the hell? What's he doing?
But like he was like mostly computer generated, right? Isn't that kind of how it looked? I don't know, honestly.
So he was a CGI character, but they did have an actor in a suit on set so that they knew like what to play against. So I'm assuming like Michael
Oh,
Jackson would have been
okay.
that also. But it's
And
hilarious
this
because
like wasn't like motion capture, right? Like this was like
yeah, no,
before they were
this was
really
before
doing.
motion capture. So this guy actually had like the rubber like skin of Jar Jar and like the silly like almost like alligator like snout.
Yeah.
So like just imagine having to act against that, and then also imagine it's Michael Jackson. Like, how would you do a single fucking scene and not like crack up every
Yeah,
time?
well, and do you think like I don't know what the guy who played Jar Jar Binks actually looked like, but I'm not sure how much of his facial features like made it through.
Not much. I think his name is Ahmed Best. I don't think I've ever actually seen what he looks like. I just know about him because he was just one of the many people in Star Wars that got harassed to the point that he just like sheltered himself from like the internet and reality because fucking Star Wars fans are the worst human beings on the face of the planet sometimes.
Oh yeah, the guy who played Jar Jar Binks. I'm sure they were very rational and understanding about how that was a character they paid him to play in a movie, and yeah, that sounds like Star Wars fans. Yeah,
Yeah, which also leads us into my next bit of not so much trivia here, but this was just something that I came across that like as I was sitting there just thinking about it, I was like, it was one of those things trying to contextualize that I was like, I just don't know how. But so the actor who played Anakin in this one, the young Jake Lloyd, retired from acting because of this movie, from the amount of bullying he was getting from his classmates. Like, I couldn't imagine being in the biggest movie of all time, probably, yeah, of all time at that point, the biggest movie ever. And none of your classmates give a shit. And they're just like bullying you. They're like, yo, there goes Anakin Skywalker, fucking loser. Like,
well, yeah, they asked him to play like a giant dweeb. Like, of course, people were bullying him. Anakin Skywalker was not cool at all in this movie. There was like, I mean, he
so
did
like,
a lot
you
of
would,
good things, but he was a total dweeb throughout.
true, but like, you would think just like, hey, someone at our school was in a movie. Like, you'd think like that guy would just be like the coolest guy in school, but they were just like, and on top of
Yeah,
that, it was the biggest movie ever. Like, you like,
I
and
mean,
I would be like, how did that kid not have the confidence to just go around and be like, I was in the biggest fucking movie of all time? Like, you think I care that you guys like are making fun of
yeah,
me? Like,
you're
I
not
was
wrong.
fucking Anakin Skywalker.
I do remember in elementary school, this girl was in a commercial for a furniture store, and we all thought that was like a pretty big deal. So you're actually making a lot of sense.
Right? Like normally you'd think that that kid would be on fucking easy street. Like that guy would get like he get prime pick of the talent in school. Like everyone would
Yeah,
want to be his friend, but
but
they
he
like
was a total dweeb,
he
like
was. But I mean,
unequivocal dweeb.
it's also kind of like the testament to kids where like they are like they don't give a fuck. Like and it's
Yeah.
kind of hilarious at the same time that kids were just like, this kid was in the biggest movie of all time. Let's fucking bully him mercilessly.
Well, yeah,
Like,
but could you imagine what those kids were hearing at home too? Like their dads are probably like, "This movie fucking sucks." Sorry. No, excuse me. Hold on, I'm not supposed to curse. I'm sorry.
it's okay. Curse
Like,
away.
they're like, "This movie's stupid, and this stupid little kid is stupid in it." And then like you go to school with that kid the next day. Of course, you're gonna make fun of him.
Just parrot it. Right? Like imagine like it would be even funnier to picture like this kid going to school, getting bullied by like the kids, and then he goes to like a teacher, and the teacher's like a huge Star Wars fan. That he's like, yeah, well, maybe if you didn't fucking ruin the movie, like you wouldn't be getting bullied.
Yeah, it's like, dude, it was it. Do you think it was anything near as bad as the way people treated The Last Jedi when it came out?
Oh, I'm sure.
Like,
I am absolutely positive that it
yeah,
was.
I guess it must have been, right? I mean, I was too
Yeah.
young to really see any of that stuff,
Yeah,
but
we were too young to notice, but I'm sure it was. And I'm sure it was the same people that were bullying people for episode one were still doing it for The Last Jedi. Like, I'm sure
yeah,
they're
I
repeat
guess that's
offenders.
true. Yeah, I guess
Yeah.
that's true.
Like they were just like, all right, Jake Lloyd's out. Now who's the new one? Oh, the Asian girl from Last Jedi. I can't remember her name
Oh,
on the top
yeah.
of my head. They're like, let's ruin her fucking life.
Yeah. Oh, geez, yeah.
Like it's insane.
Yeah. I
Like
mean,
I couldn't.
there's got to be something in here about like the weird way that people like feel like they have ownership over stuff like Star
Oh,
Wars.
absolutely. It's
It's
insane.
so
And
weird to
it's
me.
you see it so much in these types of like franchises with like Star Wars, Lord of the Rings, and all this stuff that it's they this sense of ownership is just so freaky and coldish. Like
Yeah.
it's totally fine if you watched The Last Jedi and you were like, this betrays Star Wars to me. I hate this.
Right.
That's
Like,
fine.
and
But
then
like,
you said maybe I won't see the next Star Wars movie and call it a
yeah,
day.
yeah.
Like
But
it's
like,
it's like when you act like it's like a personal insult that people made
yeah.
it is
Or
like
that
crazy
like
to me.
if you're watching a movie and at the end of that movie, you feel so strongly that you're like, I should tweet the person that was in this and tell her to
Yeah.
kill herself.
Right.
Like, you
You're
got a problem, bro.
maybe
Like,
taking it a little too
yeah.
seriously.
I think movies might not be for you. Like, I think you might need to take a step back, think about a few things, and maybe chill the fuck out because that's insane. Especially when the actor
Yeah.
doesn't even have any say in how the movie's written. Like, they're just doing a job. Like,
Yeah, that's all right.
yeah.
Dude,
Like,
even
you're just like, I
how
just
much
need a
of a say
job.
do
I
you
just
think
showed up to set.
yeah, how much of a say do you think the writers and directors have in a movie like Star Wars these days?
Oh, probably very little. I'm sure that's all made on
Right? Like
committee. Yeah.
I feel like you're on such a short leash on a movie like that, and you're going through like some bigwig at Disney to like get this everything approved.
Yeah. You're probably going through a whole like committee of board members that are like having all this final say on shit.
Yeah,
And then you watch this movie and you're like, I should bully this girl who was in it for like 35 minutes. Like,
right, right. This poor girl who's probably been waiting tables for the last 8 years, looking to
yeah.
get this one break. Like,
Yeah,
give
right.
her
Just happy to be in
fucking
like one of the biggest franchises of all time. And you're like, let's tell her to kill herself.
yeah. Jeez,
Like
you
it's
made my movie I was excited for slightly less enjoyable.
Yeah, right. Like just batshit crazy. Like the people like that blow my mind. Like they need to chill.
Yeah,
They
and
need to
it's
chill the
probably
fuck out.
this is like a little kid we're talking about in this one. Like it's
Yeah, yeah. And
crazy.
this one, this kid Jake Lloyd is at this time of this movie is probably like what, like 13, if that. Like,
But like, what do you think they bullied him for? Like, do you think they were just looking for an excuse? Like they were jealous, maybe?
maybe you know what they
Or
definitely probably bullied him for is the last like 10 seconds of the movie where he's got the little like rat tail for the Padawan. But like, oh
yeah.
yeah, you got your little rat tail, little rat boy. Like you can go be a little Jedi Padawan.
Imagine he like went to school like that every day. That would be boss.
Yeah, like he probably thought like he's like, yo, kids are really gonna like this, man. Like I was just in the biggest
Yeah.
movie of all time. Like I got my rat
Did
tail.
you,
Like,
did you see that mean mug I had on in the last 5 minutes? I was really killing it.
oh, that's so that poor kid. But on to the good stuff, which is the insane enormity of hype that was surrounding this movie. Like we talked about it with Lost World and Titanic, but like I feel like those two movies pale in comparison to just the insane hype that was around for this movie. Like we were talking toys, man. They had like you were saying, the double lightsaber gum, like anything that they could slap Star Wars on, they slapped Star Wars on to get people hyped for this movie.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, right, and that's kind of a trend so far. I think in a lot of these movies that we've
Yeah.
done, which makes
And
sense because they're kind of doing that stuff for kids, and we were kids when these movies came out, and that's why you went and saw them.
true. And this was probably the first time ever in history at that point that you were getting like another set of movies to such a beloved trilogy of movies that had been released like over a decade prior.
Yeah, it's definitely like something that's commonplace now.
Now,
It happens
yeah,
all the time now.
yeah,
With
like
like to the point where I'm like afraid of the next one they're gonna pick. You know what I mean?
exactly. Yeah, like now you're it's
Um,
like so fatigued, but like back then it was such a like insane concept that they were like, oh hey, they might make another Star Wars movie, and you're just like,
yeah,
wait,
right. There was
what?
very
Like,
like that might be the first one where there was like a big gap of time between them coming out. And like it was like that's part of why it was a big deal, right? It was like, man, they haven't made a Star Wars movie in like I don't know, what was it, like 20 years, 15 years at that point?
yeah, probably like somewhere around 15 to 20. But yeah, it's so it was just like that, just that's an insane amount of hype that I feel like kids today don't really understand because, like you said, they get like you're like, hey, here's the 38th Marvel movie already in like 10 years.
Yeah. And
Like,
it's like, and again, like if a kid that was our age when this came out went and saw it, they probably don't know or care that there was an original thing that this is like either
yeah,
continuing or rebooting. Like they couldn't give a shit.
exactly, exactly. One of my favorite things of hype that they did for this that is such a genius move for the time, especially to help like other movies that normally wouldn't do so well, was Once Upon a Time, kids. You couldn't watch movies on YouTube. You If you wanted to see a movie trailer, you had to go to the theater to see this movie trailer. And so they put the first teaser for Star Wars Episode 1 on a movie called Meet Joe Black. And
Yeah, that's
so
that Brad Pitt movie, right?
yeah, yeah, with Anthony Hopkins. Yeah. So many people paid to see that movie just to see the trailer and then left. So I looked it up and Meet Joe Black opening weekend did 15 million. So
Wow.
I'm sitting there wondering like how much of that was just Star Wars people that went in, watched that trailer, and then just dipped,
Probably a lot.
right?
That's crazy that even that was like a revenue stream for them, like putting a trailer in front of a movie.
Movie, yeah,
I
it would
guess
just
it's only for
drive
something like
business.
Star Wars, though, right? There's no way people did that for anything else back then.
Yeah, probably not like around then at least. I'm sure maybe like The Lost World, possibly, because Jurassic Park was like the biggest movie of all time when it came out. But
Yeah,
I can't
yeah,
imagine it was very often back then in the 90s. Like we
yeah,
probably like I'm sure we'll probably see it again for like the Lord of the Rings, but I'm sure it was very few and far in between.
yeah,
Yeah. And now
yeah.
here's
I mean, it's pretty crazy to me to like buy a whole ticket just to go watch a trailer.
yeah, just to go see a trailer. It's insane. But and here's another a great one to even continue to follow it up on. I want to know if you've ever even heard of this movie. So the
Okay.
first official trailer, not the teaser where it was an actual full trailer, they
Yeah.
put it they put it in front of a movie called Wing Commander.
Wing Commander?
Yeah, which
No,
I
I don't
was
think
like,
I've ever heard of
what
that.
the fuck is this
In
movie? And I looked
1998,
1999.
99?
It's this random sci-fi movie with Freddie Prince Jr.
Oh, I have seen that movie.
You've seen it?
Yes, when you said
Oh
Freddie
my
Prinze
God.
Jr., I remembered it.
It
Yes.
just all came back to him.
Yeah, it's definitely a piece of garbage movie. I can
Oh, I
tell you
could
that
imagine.
much.
So that's like I was like, dude, that's so like how many people were just like, yo, you want to go see that movie Wing Commander? Like, dude, no. And like, yo, I heard Star Wars trailer is gonna be before it. And they're like, all right, bro, like, let's just go get a ticket and see the trailer and then
Yeah.
leave.
Wow, you just unlocked like a memory I did not remember I had. I can like picture. Hold on, I'm gonna look it up really fast.
Gotta deep
What
dive
he
it now.
looked like, because I feel like I can picture the uniform he wore in that movie.
It's almost kind of like a Lost in Space style
Yeah, like
like
a
jumpsuit
grayish, like
almost.
kind of
Yeah,
jumpsuity thing, right?
yeah,
Yeah, Wing
yeah.
Commander. Yep,
Yep.
dude, I did see this. It was a real piece of shit.
Of course it was.
It was so bad. But yeah, I mean, I guess back then, if you would just put the Star Wars trailer in front of things and it was a hit.
Yeah, which is like crazy because you're just like, oh hey, Wing Commander was like maybe number one for the weekend. Like, how the fuck did that happen? It's like, oh, they put Star Wars in front of it. You're like, oh yeah,
Yeah.
of course.
It's interesting too, because like, how did the word get out back then that
That's what I'm
that's when the
saying. Like,
Star Wars trailer was
there's
releasing?
really like the internet is still in its barest form at that point. So it's not really like there's
Right.
like a Reddit or something that would spread that.
Right. Like these days, it's like hard to avoid hearing about that kind of stuff. And like
Exactly.
back then, I feel like I don't even understand how
Well,
people heard about it.
Well, now it's like overblown. Now you'll get a teaser that says the trailer is going to be in 2 days, and there's on YouTube. They'll be like,
Yeah.
"Hey,"
Right.
like, and there's like a 3 second clip, and then it's like in 2 days the trailer drops, and it's like, what the fuck are you giving me this for? Like, just drop the
Yeah.
trailer.
Yeah. This is the trailer for the trailer.
Yeah, is it a trailer for the trailer? You guys fucking kidding me? Like,
Yeah,
just
but
give me
yeah,
the
it's like
trailer.
I guess it's like word of mouth maybe. Like somebody goes and sees Wing Commander and they're like, "Hey, guess what, idiot? It was Star Wars
Yeah,
trailer was in front of it. You missed
yeah.
out on Wing Commander."
I guess back then they probably used like the trades a lot and like newspapers and stuff to like
Yeah,
maybe
I
hype it because
get
I'm
it.
sure like Variety drops or something and they're like, hey, apparently like here comes the
Yeah, but like in 1999, like did your dad have a subscription to Variety? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like,
no, he
if
did
you
not.
lived in LA, I guess you heard
Yeah,
about
man.
it, you know? But like we weren't really reading the Hollywood Reporter around my house.
Getting all the dirt sheets.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's great. But hey, it all paid off because there was an absolute just insane box office run for this movie. So Jim, hit me with some box office stats. Let's hear some of the crazy shit that Star Wars Episode 1 did here at the box office.
Yeah, so I mean, we talked a few episodes ago at the Lost World. I think our first episode actually, right?
Yeah.
And that set a whole bunch of records, and you know, it was like the fastest to $100 million. It set like the biggest opening weekend, and basically, the Phantom Menace is going to compete with the Lost World for a lot of those records. So it broke the Lost World's record for single day gross. It made $28 million. It was the fastest ever to $100 million and got it in 5 days. Which one of
Yeah,
the things I'm kind of interested to see
still impressive.
going forward is when do we start getting to $100 million opening weekends?
Oh yeah, that's gonna be
Because we're talking about the fastest of all time to get to 100 million is in 5 days.
yeah. And like
So,
now
and I
it's like
know I'm pretty sure it's Spider Man, maybe, is the first
uh,
$100 million opening weekend.
it's entirely possible.
I
Which
like,
is
so it's coming. It's soon. It's like around the
yeah,
corner.
it's not too far. It's funny that it's like now for some movies, if you don't make 100 million in your opening weekend, you're considered a bomb.
Yeah, I don't
It's
even,
like
for some movies, definitely. I don't know if that's really the benchmark anymore. I think these days a lot of people are happy to get away with like 70 or 80 million for an opening weekend, and they're like, "Oh my god, this isn't going to be a complete failure, so this is great."
they're like,
Like,
we might recoup some on here, boys. Like we
right,
might see
right.
some
Like this
green.
isn't the Flash, guys. We did it. High fives.
Very true. Very
Everybody's
true.
going to keep their jobs for a few more months. It also broke the record for a second weekend of $51.3 million. That was the biggest of all time at the time.
That's crazy.
And it was the highest grossing film of 1999 with, you want to throw a total number out there? You want to guess?
Well, I know it with its re-releases, it hit over 1 billion. So I'm imagining that when it first came out, it was probably just under that. So I'd say somewhere in the 800 to 900 range.
Yeah, 924 million.
Which for
Uh
1999, like
yeah, it's a
that's good.
crazy number.
That's
It's a
really good.
crazy number. Yeah. And I mean, it's
Yeah,
a testament. I think anybody would have seen a Star Wars movie at this point in time. I
yeah,
mean, maybe not
absolutely.
anybody, but a lot of people would have.
Yeah.
You could have
I'm
made any Star Wars movie and somebody would have
yeah,
went.
but damn close. Yeah, it is crazy that that's 924 is fucking wild. Especially since like the original trilogy Star Wars movies, like, yeah, they became like the biggest movies of all time, but even their grosses like still weren't that high.
Yeah, and especially for a movie that, like, again, my recollection of it is that everybody hated it.
Yeah, yeah, because so you would imagine that you wouldn't get a lot of repeat business because a lot of the people that would drive like going over and over again were coming out of it the first time, like lamenting it as the worst thing to ever happen.
Yeah, like, I mean, right, like, I mean, I guess those fans went and saw it multiple times, like people that really didn't like it, but I just mean from like word of mouth. Like, if you didn't see it opening weekend, it took a lot of flack from what I remember. So it's pretty impressive to me that it kept a run there. It kept a run going for so long.
It got shit on pretty badly. All the prequel movies in their time upon release were lambasted constantly. Like I feel like it wasn't until the sequel trilogy came out that you ever started to hear like decent reviews coming from people for the prequel ones. Like I've always
Yeah.
been somebody who like I'll never not say I like something just to go with the crowd of people that revile on something. So I've always had an affinity for the prequels and I've never bothered to hide that. But
Yeah.
I
I mean,
we are very much the exception to the rule when it comes to like those types of movies.
I don't want to like get too ahead of myself here, but I remember when I really started to love these prequel movies was Attack of the Clones. So like I know that I saw this one beforehand, and I know that I
Mhm.
was excited for Attack of the Clones when it came out, but I remember not really like really loving this movie. I kind of liked it, but I wasn't like big on it. And I do love the prequel movies now, but Attack of the Clones was the one that kind of like took me over that
Yeah,
finish line.
which kind of helped set it off for you. And then as you went on and aged gracefully, it became more of a love for you.
Yeah. But no, so I guess what I'm trying to say is like I could understand why people didn't like this movie.
Oh no, I can absolutely understand why people don't like this movie. Don't get me wrong. It's
I guess
there's
so.
plenty.
Let's dive in. Like, what did you like and what did you not like?
So I think my biggest thing that I love about this movie, and it's a testament to George himself, is the world building.
Yeah,
Like, I think his world building in these movies is just fucking fantastic. Like, every
yeah,
character, the worlds just feel so breathed in, and him creating something that was just so completely different from what you expected in the original trilogy. I think that turned off a lot of people too, because they just wanted to go in and have those same feelings from the original trilogy. And George wasn't interested in retelling that. He was interested in doing something new and telling this completely new area of like the age of the Jedi and the fall of the Republic, which is such like an interesting world to set it in, because you're getting to see what it looked like in the heyday
yeah.
as
Well, and
opposed
I
to like in
think
the yeah, no, go on, go on.
I was gonna say I think you're hitting on something that is like a big difference from the original trilogy, and it's also something that in my head is what Star Wars is, which is this like really larger than life space war. You know what I'm saying? Like a literal Star War. Like there's huge battles and like fleets of ships fighting each other and the Jedi are doing all kinds of like fancy twirly moves. Like
Yeah,
that stuff's all Star Wars in my head and that's what it is to me. And the original trilogy had very little if any of that.
yeah.
And this movie has it in spades. It's everywhere, you know.
Yeah. And
Um
it works so well with each other, because like it makes sense in the original trilogy that it would be stripped down like that, because it feels very barren, like it's a wasteland from the fall of the Republic.
Well,
And it's
yeah, and I mean,
fun
less
seeing.
artistically, they just have a lot less money, right? So
Yeah, well, yeah, well,
everything's
yeah,
like bare bones and like cool practical effects and
yeah.
yada
But
yada.
it works in their favor for that. But
But
this
yeah,
one,
this is where he's like, they gave me as much money as I wanted, so look at how crazy this all
yeah,
is.
and like, and I have CGI to the point where I can, really create and envision this how I envision it in my head. And it's just, yeah, it works wonders. Like, it's amazing seeing like the early age of the Jedi, and you're getting them at their best. So it's like you're not just seeing like Luke, who's just learned, and like they're hitting like two lightsaber
Is
moves.
it
That's it.
is it their best, TJ? Is it?
Well, well, obviously not, since they end up causing their own doom, but they have their moments.
Yeah.
If they weren't so
Yeah, no,
goddamn full of themselves.
I get what you're saying though. Like you're at the point when this like cool republic is at what's supposed to be the height of its power.
Yeah, and that leads me to like one of my favorite things about the movie, which I know is a thing that turns a lot of people off. And I like the whole Senate trade organization tariff thing going on. Like,
Yeah.
it's interesting to me in a way, because you're watching, knowing what we know, having seen the original trilogy. It's interesting in a way watching that, because you're watching Palpatine like orchestrate all this. So it's interesting
Yeah.
watching like everyone get played for fools, as like he's making these chess piece moves that he knows is going to pay off like years down the line.
Yeah,
And
kind of. And I did like get into that sequence when it was going on. Like when he was like manipulating the vote and trying to get them to do the no vote of no confidence in the chancellor or whatever crazy stuff it was.
yeah,
Like I was kind of into it, but it was also a part of like what I didn't like probably the biggest thing that I didn't like about this movie is that
yeah,
it felt like it meandered a lot into things that were at best tangential to what was going on. You know what I mean? Like
yeah.
as specifically it did something that I think is like a cardinal sin in a movie that becomes a trilogy of movies
Mm.
where like you pointed out the Palpatine storyline there is really all about setup. It has very little payoff in this movie, with the promise that it's going to have a huge payoff later. But if it doesn't pay off at all in this movie, I don't know why it's in this movie. You know what I mean? Like, I don't really care about it, you know?
Yeah, no, this is definitely very much a setup movie. And I agree with you that there is a lot of stuff that does meander. throughout this, I think the stuff that bothered me more meandering was everything with the Gungans. It was just like
Yeah.
it they
Yeah.
felt like they were just in there just for Jar Jar hijinks. Because it's like, would
Yeah.
you
I mean,
really have lost anything if we just cut them fighting the droids at the end? Like, whenever we cut to them, because like the end, the final set piece is fantastic. Like
yeah.
their
Oh,
fight scene,
absolutely.
and also even Anakin up in space, like just wrecking shit with them, is also like
Yeah.
dope. And then we cut to the Gungans, and it's just
Anakin in
them.
space, decidedly not pod racing, by the way.
Yeah,
It was
not pod
not pod
racing,
racing.
not pod. This is definitely
I
not
don't
pod
care what
racing.
he says when he flies out of that ship. It was not pod racing.
But then you cut to the Gungans and the droids, and you're just watching a bunch of bumbling idiots. Just like it's literally every time you cut to them, just felt like hijinks for Jar Jar.
Well, yeah,
And
and that's the problem, right? It's not that the Gundams exist that's the problem, because if like it's the fact that they're goons, you know what I
yeah,
mean?
like they're all just
Like
there just to be doofuses.
in Avatar, the Gungans are really cool, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, but it's because they're like competent and capable warriors, and like in this, you got Jar Jar like tripping over something and rolling grenades onto people.
Yeah. What is he?
It's
He
like
like he
very silly, yeah.
Yeah, he's basically a Marx brother in a Star Wars movie. Like he falls over, gets a gun stuck to his leg, and he starts hitting people he just starts hitting his
Right,
leg, and he's
right,
firing
right.
and killing them. And it's just like, bro, what is happening right now?
Yeah,
Like,
and it's honestly like it feels like the worst continuation of the Ewoks kind of like sequence that you can imagine.
yeah.
It's like how can we take this thing that was at the end of Return of the Jedi that a lot of people didn't like and make it worse? And that's what I feel
And
like
that's
that
yeah.
turns into.
Yeah, because at least with like the Ewoks, you could kind of make the case that it's like, oh, they were terrain based, they know the area. Like at least they were like skilled warriors, even though they were silly little teddy bears.
Well,
Like,
yeah, but it was still like a silly thing though.
yeah,
Like
but
they're
yeah,
like
no, it
hitting
was
them with
still, yeah,
like big sticks like from
yeah.
either side.
They
Like it
were
was goofy,
still
you know?
they were still definitely very goofy, but yeah, I guess they were more endearing because they weren't just like set up for a joke.
Yeah, they
Whereas like
weren't the Three Stooges. They were,
exactly, exactly. Whereas like
which is what
every
Jar
time
Jar
you see
is.
the Gungans, it's like when they go to first meet the big boss, and he just goes like, and you're just like, bro, what?
Yeah,
Why? Like, why?
and all the Misa and the Yusa is awful. I hate every single
Yeah,
bit of it.
yeah, yeah. It's very it's not great.
He says like how wooed like 7 times. It's
Yeah,
so bad.
it's just like Misa Oki Day. And it's just like, please stop.
It's
I'm
so
begging you,
bad.
stop.
And it's like so bad to the point where I can't imagine that people like watched that movie, like test audiences or producers or like anybody involved, and was like, "Yep, that's a great idea. Let's do it."
Yeah, yeah. Or
Like,
yeah,
there's no way.
even when they were watching dailies, like to be like, yeah,
Yeah, like
this is
how
gonna
were
hit.
people like looking at each other, being like, "Wow, can you believe this? This is great." Like, there's no way they
Like
had to hate
this is
it, and I
well,
don't understand how it got in the movie.
I think it's there's like a behind the scenes video for Phantom Menace where like George Lucas is watching the rough cut for the first time, and like
Uh,
it ends and it pans over to him and he just goes, I think I might have gone too far in some
yeah,
places.
I'll
It's
say
like
so. Yeah, it was
like,
pretty
yeah, bro.
far.
It's like, yeah, dude, I think you definitely did.
Yeah, and like so like they were rough, like with their like diction and their like accents and stuff. And then like what's up with those Trade Federation guys?
Yeah, like
What's
it
up with
definitely
that?
feels that every time he shows a character, like a certain alien character, they have to be some like weird stereotype.
Yeah, and it's like he
Because like the
feels like he's
Gungans are
like
definitely just
adding
like
depth to
urban.
the movie,
Yeah.
but it's not. It's making it so much more shallow. Like
Yeah. And I don't know.
like
I
the
guess because it's
world
just
feels way less like a sci-fi like expanse than when there's like a really stereotypical like rickshaw Asian guy in it. You know what I mean?
yeah.
It's like it's crazy to me.
Yeah, like the Gunray trade guys just sound like very Asian, and then like the Gungans are just like streetwise like black kids, it feels like.
Yeah,
And then
well, I've
like
heard they're like they call them like Caribbean, like I guess,
we're
like
like
and
I
like I
get
guess I
yeah.
could kind of
I
hear
guess
that, but
I
it's
could
like a
kind of see
weird like
that.
caricature of Caribbean people. Like it's not
Exactly.
actually what they're like, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Like it just
So it's
feels
like
like
hard for me to even say it's supposed to be them. It's just
yeah.
stupid.
Like it just sounds like George Lucas like heard their accent and was like, I like that. And we was just like, let's use that for the Gungans. And they were just like,
Yeah.
Yoopsa, Misa, yes, I. And it's like, I don't know about that. Like, get the sir
So
off of
bad.
there.
So bad.
And
So
then like
that's a lot of what I didn't like. That's a big
yeah,
part of what I didn't
yeah.
like.
And then Watto's another one.
Oh yeah, he's
Yeah,
horrible, dude.
yeah, he's
Like
another one
to the
where he
point
just
where it
sounds like,
takes me out of the movie.
yeah, it's like,
Like
please
you
stop.
knew what you were doing, sir.
Yeah.
Like you
Yeah, like
knew what you were doing.
all of these were perfectly orchestrated. And I
Right.
think the
There's no way
easiest
that happened by accident, you know?
exactly. Like you made that conscious move, man. And like I don't think he did it like out of like anything hurtful or anything.
I don't know. I don't think so. I'm not saying
And I
that
mean,
he did
yeah,
or he
we can't
didn't. I'm
yeah,
just like it's just amazing to me that for whatever reason he did that stuff.
yeah, he did it not once, not twice, but three times
Yeah,
in one movie.
absolutely. Absolutely, yeah.
In one movie. Although I will say like on the opposite side of that, it is it's one of those movies, and I'm sure like the memes have helped in this regard. But it's just one of those movies where it's so funny that I can sit here and I'm going to say that one of the things I don't like about it is George Lucas's dialogue, but then also I'm going to quote so many of his dialogue in it that also makes me laugh, and I still remember to this day. Like it's
Yeah. Well,
weird how much of a balancing act that is, and it's weird that you can hate something and also love it at the same time. So it leads into that psychology of like, does something have to be perfect to be good? Like, can shitty dialogue at the same time also endear you at times?
yeah. I mean, like, I don't know, it's hard because like I feel like a lot of lines in all of these movies, like all these prequel movies and Phantom Menace on its own, like there's not a lot of in between, right? Like the lines are either like so cringeworthy level bad that you can't believe somebody like again, like you can't believe somebody was like, this is exactly what somebody should say at this part, you know?
Yeah.
Like we're just like, who wrote that down? Or it's like super memorable, you know? Like it's like I remember it and I think it's awesome.
Yeah.
And part of those, like, there's a lot of crossover there where some of them are memorable because of how bad they are, and that's why I love them, you know?
Exactly. Like, and one that springs to mind just from us talking about the caricatures is one of the trade guys when like they find out about the Jedi, they're like, this is getting out of hand. Now there's two of them. It's just like
Yes,
every time I hear that
yes.
line, like I crack up.
Dude, I lost it at that part, yeah. Like, where it's like, oh my god, we're up to two.
Like, like it's just so silly. But it's one of those lines that every time I hear it, like I could quote it like any day of the week. And then on the
Yeah,
inverse
yeah.
of that, of a line that's just terrible and cringy and is probably why Jake Lloyd got bullied so much, is when Natalie Portman's like, "You're a slave," and he's like, "I'm a person, and my name's Anakin." And it's like, oh boy,
Yeah.
it's like,
And then
oh
like I feel like it's like just seconds later where he like hops off the counter and he's like, "Yippee!"
yeah, that's right, he does
It's
that.
it's so ridiculous.
Yeah, like he's like that kid had no shot, man. Like that poor kid.
Yeah,
Like
because
you
they
can't say those lines and like and not get bullied.
yeah, right. They made him into a total dweeb.
Like it's
Um,
kind of hard for anyone in that movie to look cool with the exception of Qui-Gon, Obi-Wan, and Darth Maul.
yeah, Qui-Gon is pretty cool.
Like
Darth
and I
Maul is pretty cool.
yeah, like and I think that's mostly due to just the fantastic actors that that Liam Neeson and Ewan McGregor are, and Ray Park, the guy who did the stunts and everything for Darth Maul, just has that presence about him. But outside of those three, like nobody else really comes off cool in this. Like I'm sure Natalie Portman got bullied in school also for this movie.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, maybe I don't know. She wasn't particularly great in it. I mean, she wasn't bad in it either. She was
She's
just
not
kind of there.
terrible, but like she also has a lot of like stilted dialogue in it, where like the line delivery, you're just like, oof, oof, tough,
Yeah.
tough.
Which this is kind of like I had a question written down in my notes that I like. I guess we're like sort of nearby it right here.
Okay.
Who is the main character in this movie?
Oh, I there really is not one.
Who is the protagonist, right? Like that's like it's like there's no like, and that's kind of why I feel like it meanders a lot. Like this is a
Yeah,
big
because
part
there's
that
really
didn't work for me.
no concise lead to it. Because it really starts out as Qui-Gon's movie, where he's like the main
Yeah,
driver of
kinda.
action. And then kind of once we meet Anakin, like you're supposed to be like, oh, well, like now it's Anakin. But I guess like really I guess it is kind of Qui-Gon's movie because it's like he goes through like by the end, he's like because the whole movie is really the lead up to like the fate of Anakin in the moment of Qui-Gon versus Darth Maul.
Right.
Because if Qui-Gon had survived that and trained Anakin, there's every chance that Anakin wouldn't have turned to the dark side because he's got that father figure in Qui-Gon.
Sure,
But
right,
with
yeah.
Qui-Gon getting murdered there and Obi-Wan taking him on, Obi-Wan was more kind of like the older brother and not the father figure that he needed. So
Yeah.
like his fate is sealed in that. So like you can make the case that it's Qui-Gon, but
Yeah, and I mean
it's a muddied case at best.
that kind of makes sense because like one of the things that worked for me actually is like the first 25 minutes of the movie, which
Okay.
are like at a pretty breakneck pace from the second they're on that Trade Federation ship till right about when they're escaping Naboo with Natalie Portman. I think is like about like 25 minutes in, 30 minutes in.
Yeah.
And that whole sequence is awesome, right? And it, you know, he kind of is the driver of that whole thing. So I could definitely get the case for it. I don't know, he gets very passive as the movie goes on. Like it's
Yeah,
like in that
definitely.
middle section, it's a lot of like uh Padme and Anakin
And
like are
Anakin.
really like the
Yeah.
emotional drive of the movie. They're like doing a lot of the big things. And Qui-Gon's kind of like just, you know, Jedi maneuver and stuff.
He's just I will train the boy.
Yeah.
So he's
Yeah.
just standing around, I will train the boy. Yeah,
Pretty
because like
much.
once they get off of Tatooine and they have Anakin, it really he has George has to do all the setup with setting up Anakin and Padme and Anakin not being trained after going through his little like trial thing because he's too
Yeah,
old. So
and
it's like quite
especially at that part you were talking about with Palpatine too, like Qui-Gon really fades into the background
yeah,
like for that whole section.
for that portion. Yeah, so it maybe might have been a stronger movie if if they had kind of just saved most of that for like later.
Yeah, I get just like I don't know, there had to have been a way to focus in on one person in this movie. You
Yeah,
know what I
or
mean? Like there
find
had
ways
to have been a way.
yeah, or find ways to keep Qui-Gon as like a part of that.
Yeah, because I don't know. I just feel like that's like a strength of like those original trilogy movies. Like, you know, I know in The New Hope, Luke Skywalker is the main character.
Yeah.
And there's a lot going on around him. Like, it is an ensemble, but there, I never lose sight
Yeah.
of who that protagonist is and what
Yeah.
journey he's going on, you
And
know?
he's always like, for the most part, driving like what's happening, or at least a part of everything that's happening around him. Like he's
Yeah, right.
defining the characters
Right.
around
He's
him and
very
everything.
active in the movie, you know?
Yeah,
And I
which
don't
is
know. I just feel like that's really lacking in this one, which was
yeah,
made it made it worse for me in a pretty big
yeah.
way.
So he definitely probably should have taken another run at honing in more on keeping Qui-Gon as the focus. Because I mean, you still couldn't do those like Padme Anakin scenes, but then maybe add a bit in there where like Qui-Gon is giving Anakin advice on like attachment at that point, like because he can see what's going on with Anakin and Padme, and he's like, I don't like that. Like, I just got you away from your mother. He's like, you think I need
Yeah,
you dealing with
right.
this shit? Like,
Right. Like that's, you know, if you're gonna like train this kid, that feels like something that could come up, you know? And like
exactly, yeah. So
again,
like,
it adds some challenge for your main character, you know what I mean? Like
yeah, because now he's like, I gotta like lead this boy, and I could already see him flying off the handle.
but I don't know. I don't want to sit here and try and rewrite George Lucas's movie. It just felt
Yeah,
like
yeah.
as like it's a movie that I enjoyed that was also very flawed, and I felt like for me that was one of the flaws. Like
No, I definitely could do with a bit more of seasoning on figuring out more, decisively, like, is Qui-Gon your main character in this movie? Like, and if so, he really should be driving everything that's happening in
yeah.
this movie.
And
Um,
like I think
yeah,
it went better in some places than in others because the pod race sequence incredible.
yeah, and I like that Qui-Gon puts his fit like knows to trust into the Force and put his faith in Anakin there,
Yeah.
and like
And he
he's
like
like,
maneuvers the dice, right? He does like that
yeah,
little hand trick on the
yeah,
dice.
no pot is worth two slaves. Fine, just the boy, just the boy.
Yeah.
It's just
Yeah.
it's so silly. But yeah, no, the pod racing scene is absolutely fantastic. There,
It was
that
pretty cool. So,
yeah,
okay, hold on.
go
Pod
on.
racing. It reminded me of a very specific movie. I want to see if you can guess which movie it reminded me of.
Oh
Something that
boy,
came out after this.
after Star Wars,
Yeah, another racing movie.
another racing movie. Oh boy.
Yeah.
I feel like Fast and the Furious is too easy of the answer there. And knowing
Not
you,
Fast and the
it's not Fast
Furious.
and the Furious. So
No.
it's got to be another. It's knowing you, you do love your obscure. I'm gonna say Speed Racer,
100% Speed Racer.
dude.
Yes.
I fucking
Dude, the
know
pod
you like the
racing
back of my head.
sequences that that felt like Speed Racer felt, dude. It felt like very adventurous. Like obviously they're not on wheels, so it's a little different. But
Yeah,
it was kind of like Ben Hur meets Speed Racer. That's what that whole scene felt like to me.
yeah. That was just kind of like the chariot scene, but like
Yes,
sci-fi
exactly.
guy.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely,
Exactly.
definitely, dude. And
And
that
it's like amazing because pod racing doesn't make any sense. Pods they're racing in scientifically mean nothing. You know what I mean?
yeah,
Like there's just like a
there's so much
purple lightning thing
variety in it.
that's like
Yeah,
connecting stuff, and who knows what that means. But somehow they have all of these scenes of it breaking and him fixing it, and it all makes perfect sense to me. You know what I
yeah.
mean? Like
Yeah, like
it's
that's a
just like
testament to his like ability to write a good Like George might
yeah,
lack in dialogue, but that man knows how to create like a thrilling fucking set piece.
yeah, like none of it, like all of this is nonsense, but he's telling me such a good story and he's telling it totally visually. You know, it's so
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah, visually, and I love the sound design in that scene too. Like when you'll have like
Yes.
Sebulba's one go past, and it's like like, and you're just like, dude, I could feel that bass like in my
Yes.
spine.
Yeah, or when he
Like,
sends Anakin off the big ramp and Anakin like jumps back down in front of him,
yeah,
which is not unlike the scene in Speed Racer when he climbs
yeah,
back up the
yeah.
mountain. I'm just saying.
I also love that scene for just again going to the world building is George's ability to create these like one-off species characters like Sebulba, or like you get the
Yeah.
random like little frog guy with his helmet on. You see him for 1 second before he crashes and dies. He's just like and then just like
Yeah.
explodes. Like his just
1,000%.
ability
Yeah.
to throw those things in there and just like make this place feel so expansive is
Yeah,
just
or that guy at the beginning whose engines also don't start,
yeah, yeah, and he's
who's
like sitting
like
there like
who's just there to job to Anakin. So when we
yeah.
see Anakin fix it, we're like, hey, he's still better than that guy. All right.
And you just got like those silly little droids like working on his thing and everything. They're like, we have no fucking
Yeah, the
idea. They're
pit
like,
droids.
dude, that's another one that leaves it just terrible fucking comedy with Jar Jar in that scene when like the like camel like creature is bringing out the pods and the one like farts and Jar Jar
Oh
like smells
yeah,
like
yeah,
oh he's and it's like oh my god, dude, you can't
yeah.
help
He's like
yourself, can you?
Pisa Yusa.
Yeah, and he's a
So bad. Yeah, dude. I also thought it was cool to see Tatooine again, like because I don't know if it's just because I was a kid when I first saw like A New Hope, but it didn't click to me that it was like a outside of the realm of the Empire and the Republic and everything, and it was just controlled by gangsters. I thought that was pretty cool.
yeah, no, that's really dope that it's yeah, that it is just kind of like this derelict planet because it's too far out of the way to peacekeep. So like
And
just
they
like
can't
the
even
mob
protect the
just
pod races. Like the
yeah,
Tusken Raiders are like taking pot shots at him.
that's the best. Is like you're just on the course, like, yeah, some Tusken Raiders might be out there
Yeah.
just
Like
sniping you.
that's just turn 10. Like the Tusken Raiders are like shooting at you.
It's built into the race.
Yeah. Oh, dude, speaking of pod racing, by the way, I didn't look this up, but I'm pretty sure.
Okay.
Did you recognize who the pod racing announcer was?
No, but isn't it tell me because it's on the tip of my tongue and I feel like I do know, but I can't think of it.
I'm double checking it right now, but I'm pretty sure it was Greg Proops, the guy from from Whose Line Is It
Whose line
Anyway?
is it anyway, right? Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. It
Yeah.
sounded so much like him.
Yeah, because he's got that like squeaky type of voice.
Oh, I'm totally wrong.
Wow, way off. Swing and a
Yeah,
miss.
it sounded so much like him. That's crazy. I
Maybe they
don't
got a
think it's
Greg
him.
Proofs. They got a Greg Proofs sound alike.
He's the pod race announcer. Oh no, okay, no. The green head was this other guy, Scott Caporo. The
Okay,
other head was Greg Proops. Okay.
there we go. My God.
Yeah, Greg Proops. Yeah, it was him. And he was so good, dude. He's like, I know the Tuscan Raiders. Like, yeah, that was
Like
so
what a
pod
what
racing
a
was amazing.
yeah, pod racing is amazing. That's one of the best set pieces in that movie. And then the finale set piece is just fantastic of them going back onto
Yeah.
Naboo.
And then after the pod racing one, they just completely sucked the wind out of the whole movie. It's like
Yeah, well, because you don't
it
really
felt like that was an ending. You know what I mean?
yeah, well, because for the until we get to that finale, the rest of the movie is setting up your Anakin and Padme scenes, and then going to Coruscant where like Anakin gets trained, and they're like, "We won't train him," and Qui-Gon's like, "Well, fuck you, I'm gonna train him anyway," and they're like,
Yeah.
"Don't
And
do
they're
it,"
like,
and
you
then
can't have two
yeah,
apprentices. That's
yeah,
unheard of.
yeah, and then they're like, "Don't do it," and then they're like, "All right, go back and deal with the trade people," and it was like,
Okay, so since we're getting into the part of the movie like the Senate and the Jedi Council and everything,
yeah,
that whole like section and like built out world of the movie, that also reminded me of another sci-fi movie.
oh boy,
Can you guess which one it is?
like the whole area of Coruscant.
Yeah, like the very like how over the top it was and like how rounded everything was and how silly the bigger world was.
Oh damn, all right, because at first like
I'm gonna give you what's potentially a very big hint.
okay.
Vin Diesel is in it.
Oh, well, all right. Well, that yeah, that gives it away at that point. Is the Riddick series,
Yeah, Chronicles of
the
Riddick,
Chronicles of
dude.
Riddick? Originally, when you first had said like what Coruscant reminds me of, and like just thinking like of like the establishing shots, I was gonna say Blade Runner because it has that like same style of like
Oh yeah, I could see that. Yeah,
yeah, but just more well lit. But then once you started saying silly and everything, I was like, well, it's definitely not Blade Runner then.
yeah, no, not Blade Runner. It was, dude. It reminded me of Chronicles of Riddick. Everything was so dramatic
Yeah,
and
I could.
played so straight, but it was so silly. All of
Yeah,
it.
definitely. Yeah, I could see that. Well, I think my favorite thing that it gave us was getting to see like all of the other types of Jedi that we would come to love that were in the background that just looked
Yeah.
hilarious. Like there was the dude with like the eight foreheads that just like kept extending to the
Yes.
sky.
Yeah. Yeah.
Master Plo Koon, who just in the Clone Wars was like the
Yep.
dopest
Yep.
fucking Jedi. Like, so you got to see
Totally.
so many of those ones that were just background characters at that point. But yeah, those scenes definitely really slow down the movie at that point. And I guess like I get that you need like a bit of a breather from pod racing. Like you can't just go right into whatever the
Yeah.
next big thing is, but like
Yeah.
they needed to find a way to make it a bit more interesting and move a bit better because it
Yeah,
really
that's like when I
grinds.
really started to lose interest in the movie. It was because like
Yeah.
Palpatine started to take like a bigger role, and it was like, all right, but what the hell is this guy doing in this movie? He's like
Yeah.
barely been in it up till now.
And it's literally just like silly lines where like, like Palpatine's like, we will watch your career with great interest. It's like, shut the fuck
Yeah,
up. Like it's so goddamn on the nose.
yeah. And I mean, like I said before, his Senate play was kind of cool. Like he like tricked them into voting him chancellor, and like the whole thing was like him playing the long game.
Yeah.
But like it's just so buried in that movie, like, and maybe
Yeah.
it's just because I know where it goes and like it feels underwhelming in the like rewatching the first one, but I don't know, I just felt like it was kind of a bummer that he didn't do more or was like just not in it if he wasn't going to do more.
Yeah, like it felt like very set upy. So obviously like you're not getting any payoffs to it. So it feels like it was just like, why is
like
it here?
like if you turn on Attack of the Clones and you've never seen Palpatine before and he's just in charge of the Senate, are you asking any questions?
Yeah, no, not at all.
Right, never. Like who
Yeah,
cares?
never.
Like
Yeah. Like it's such a small like bit of setup that like, yeah, it makes sense in the grand scheme of like of the trilogy. But when you're just going from movie to movie, you're like, this
yeah.
really,
But if I turn on a movie, and I see that guy for the first time, I'm saying, "Oh, cool! I'm getting like more back, like in-depth knowledge of this world at the Senate thing that I
yeah,
didn't know about before. I didn't need to know anything about it before. Now I do. So now you tell me about it. You know?
exactly. Yeah. So it's definitely like one of those things that like it's probably something he could have worked a little bit better on. But let's talk
Yeah,
about probably the best villain that they have in this movie, and one of the best villains they've ever put in a Star Wars movie, and that's Darth fucking Maul. Like with
yeah,
such little time, that guy is a goddamn presence. Like, and I was reading
yeah,
too that he originally in the script and everything had like a decent amount of lines. And in post, George just like cut them all. And I feel like that works fantastic for this movie is him just being
Yeah,
dark presence. Like when he shows up in the video feed where like the Trade Federation guys are getting owned by Palpatine, and then like Darth Maul just walks into the background and crosses his
yes.
arms. You're like, dude, that guy, don't fuck with that guy. Like,
Yeah, that guy means business.
yeah. And then without a fucking word of dialogue, like, like you're like, we don't want to mess with that guy. Like that guy's got fucking presence right there.
Yeah, and honestly, like I think it might just be because of seeing him like from seeing him in other Star Wars media since this movie came out. I didn't feel like I feel like he had way more lines than I remember. You know what I mean? I feel like he
Yeah.
was like didn't say anything the whole movie. And I mean he really only said like two or three things, but
Yeah, I think he only
even
has like
that felt like a lot.
I think like right, isn't like his one line of dialogue just being like, "Yes, master." When like Palpatine's like, "Go to Naboo, fuck those guys up." He's like, "Yeah, all right,
Yeah,
I got you."
he had a couple longer ones. I couldn't remember. I couldn't tell you what they were because I was just so disappointed that he said anything. I didn't really listen.
Yeah. Well, it's funny that he did you watch the Clone Wars and stuff like that?
I've seen most of the show. Yeah,
Most of the show. It's funny how he kind of in the Clone Wars becomes like much more of like a Shakespearean villain
yeah,
because
yeah.
like
I definitely saw those episodes where they go to that weird planet that his people are
yeah,
from, and they like find
Dathomir, I
him
think it is, or
resurrected.
yeah, whatever. Yeah, and he's just like waxing poetically like all the time. Where you're like, dude, what happened to this
Yeah,
guy? Like,
yeah, yeah,
now we can't get him to shut the fuck up. Like,
yeah. Yeah, so I guess I'm wrong. He was more talky in Clone Wars. I don't know. I feel like I remembered him being way more quiet than he actually was in this movie.
yeah. I think he only has a few, but he is just such a badass presence in this movie. And regardless of how I think most people feel about this movie, whether you liked it or not, I think everybody can agree on the fact that when he activated that second lightsaber, that was the coolest moment in cinema
Yeah,
up
it
to
was
that
pretty
point.
rad.
Like
And
nothing beat that.
yeah, it was pretty great. It was
Yeah.
pretty great. Like
Like
for some reason, I just like it, you know having a second blade on your lightsaber is twice as good. You know, like how
yeah.
could you go wrong?
It's one of those things now that seems so right, but like back then you were like, why didn't anyone else like Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon were probably both like, why didn't we think of that? Like in their heads, like when he activated the second one, like they're like, fuck, we should
Yeah,
have thought of that.
like oh my god. But yeah, no, and like they have some like good. This is like the best part of this movie is probably the lightsaber fights, right? Like
Yeah, dude,
even the one with Qui-Gon and him in the desert where Qui-Gon kind of puts him over and like Darth Maul's got Qui-Gon on the ropes before he jumps into the spaceship to escape. Like
there's
that introduction really sets him up as somebody who like is gonna mean business.
yeah, like someone
And
not to
then
be
I mean of
trifled with.
course the duel in the on the spaceship at the end or in the Senate at the end, wherever they are.
It's fantastic. It's one of there's just such energy to it, and it's amazing watching it because it's like they should have that because this is like the height of the Jedi, so they would be these just like insanely skilled warriors. So there's just this like almost like Victorian sword fighting era of choreography to it.
Yeah, and it's definitely this movie is definitely like got the great Star Wars choreography where it's like a lot of flash and if you really pay attention like there's some pretty silly blocking going on, you know what
Yeah,
I
like
mean?
there is some like such funny maneuvering going on, like when you really like watch each move.
Yeah, it's definitely more dancing than
Yeah,
fighting for
but the
sure.
pat but the pageantry of it is just so epic and like fun that you don't even care.
Oh yeah, it's amazing. Yeah,
Yeah, like it's
it's
like
really well done.
it's so
And
absolute and one of the things that I lament that I keep forgetting to talk about whenever we talk about these movies, like I didn't talk about for Lost World, I completely missed it for Titanic,
yeah.
is just how well the soundtrack adds to the movie.
Oh yeah, Duel of Fates,
Yeah,
right? I
Duel of
mean,
Fates
that's
might be one of the best written pieces of music for a movie ever. Like it fits that finale and hypes up that fucking lightsaber battle to just the 11th degree with how just like sick that beat is.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's definitely the most memorable, like for me anyway. It's the most memorable piece of music. Like anytime I hear that. And that's what I people always say like the da 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 da, right? It's like Star Wars. For me, the da 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 da,
Yeah.
like that's Star Wars. You know
Yeah,
what I
just how
mean?
it just
Like
keeps
that's
building
like
up. Yeah, it's like
right, right. Yeah, exactly. It's amazing. Yeah,
yeah,
it's really, really, really good. And that whole fight that they have with that and as the backdrop is incredible. With that might be the coolest scene in the whole movie when they're going through that hallway with the big red like laser doors,
yeah,
and they all get separated into different ones, and Darth Maul is just pacing back and forth like ready to like tear him up, and Qui-Gon just like closes his eyes and sits down and starts meditating. It's
yeah.
so cool. It's so cool. And Obi-Wan's like watching from afar, like desperately trying to catch up. It's so well done.
It's just perfectly well done, and I love how the music like builds and crescendos with the scene. Like it's John Williams is has to be like, if not one of the best composer for movies of all time.
Yeah. Now,
Like
what did you think of the end of that lightsaber duel?
like the actual like end where Obi-Wan does
Yeah,
his
the
like
end
crazy jump.
specifically. I specifically want to hear your thoughts on the high ground for the end of that lightsaber battle.
Yeah, it's one of those ones where like you gotta just like accept it because you're like, oh yeah, I guess Jedis can just do like crazy jump maneuvers. But it's one of those ones where like you sit there like if you try to think about it too much, you're like, I feel like Darth Maul had him, man. Like even if he does this crazy ass
Well,
jump, like how did
Darth
Darth Maul
Maul
just
had
watch that happen?
he had the high ground, dude. He had the high ground in such a big way.
Listen,
Like,
Obi-Wan
which
always has the high ground, even when he's
you
got the low
know you know
ground.
what I'm referencing, right?
Yes, I
Like
know.
in
Of
the
course I
third
know
one,
what
the
you're
high ground
referencing.
matters
Yeah.
so much. And in this one, it's just like high ground, who cares?
Yeah, high ground doesn't matter. Well, I guess Obi-Wan is just the king of the high ground. So even when he's got the low ground, he knows all the moves he has to make to take the high ground.
Yeah, and then of course there's that iconic thing that I will never forget. Probably the most memorable part of the movie for me is when Darth Maul is like falling down that shaft and his
Yeah,
body like splits into two pieces. Like so cool.
he just disappears down that like insane shaft where it's just like they're just in a building. Like where that's the biggest shaft I've ever seen. Like where the hell's that
Yeah.
go? Who
Well,
uses that?
they were in like the big room before there with like the big towers of light.
Yeah.
So I think it's like a power kind of thing. I don't know.
Still, it's the biggest building I've ever seen in my fucking life.
Yeah, it's on they're on like a ship, right? Isn't it a
No,
ship or
no,
is it they're
they're
in a
on
building
they're
in
on
Naboo?
Naboo. Yeah, they're just in like the
Yeah.
big like building in Naboo. So it's just like, where
Yeah.
the fuck is this thing?
I mean, I'm not sure if it's a good thing or a bad thing that I was just like couldn't tell you where they actually were or not. Like, you know what I mean? Like, because I don't really care where they were. Like,
Yeah.
it's just like I get it. Like, they're fighting and somebody's got to die at the end of this.
Yeah, like it just looks
But
cool.
like,
Shut up and enjoy it.
yeah, and I did. I totally did. And it's like, but also I couldn't have told you what that meant for the greater
Yeah.
plot.
Like where
Like,
they were.
no
Yeah.
idea.
But yeah, just fantastic absolute finale there. And then of course he can't help but just reserve a helping of the end of A New Hope there with like them having the sweet like party and like Naboo with all the Gungans
Yeah.
and like they give him
Dude,
like the sweet orb.
say what you will about the Gungans, but they know how to throw a
Yeah,
party, man.
they know how to throw a bitchin' party. And then
That party was
cuts
rocking.
then it cuts to those lame Jedi just burning Qui-Gon all somberly.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Well, that leads to my favorite meme ever, where it's like a picture of Qui-Gon burning, and then it cuts to Obi-Wan and Anakin, and Obi-Wan just looks at him and says the line, "That's gonna be you someday." It's like my
That's
favorite
pretty
meme.
good.
It's
It's pretty good.
just so goddamn stupid, but great at the same time. But all right, any other thoughts or additions that you want to say about Star Wars Episode One? Speak now or hold your peace.
I feel like we hit everything, man. I feel like we did a pretty thorough job.
We did. We did a very deep dive into a very flawed but entertaining movie. But all right, now is time in the podcast where we will give our final rating for Star Wars Episode One, The Phantom Menace. We rate out of 5 stars here, me and James each, and then we combine ours to see what the total ranking is and add it to our list of movies. So, Jim, having said all that, what is your final rating for Star Wars Episode One, The Phantom Menace?
I want to start by saying that this is what I was getting at last time when I said the ratings are going to start to get wonky. because now I'm in a spot where we gave Rugrats a 4, right?
Okay.
And I'm sitting here and I'm saying this movie was a lot better than Rugrats.
Okay.
Like significantly better. But I don't know that I can give it much more than a 2 out of 5, right? Like so now I'm like, is it gonna be tied with Rugrats? So I don't know. I think I'd give this a 3 out of 5.
3 out of 5.
Yeah, 3 out of 5 for Phantom Menace.
That's fair. When I first, for something that people at home that don't know about me, I am a freak when it comes to my movies. I know every movie that I've ever seen because I've had an Excel spreadsheet since I was a kid where I've written down every goddamn movie I've ever watched and I give myself the ratings and everything. So my original rating that I had on there for this when I looked before I watched this for the podcast was I had given this movie a 4-star rating. And I was curious when I watched it this time if that was going to stick with me or not. And
Sure,
having
sure.
seen it now again, I can see why I gave it that 4-star rating because I want to love this movie and ignore its flaws for everything that I enjoy out of it. But when push comes to shove and I really sit there and you look at it for how the movie is, regardless of wanting to push the stuff that I love to the forefront, I agree with you that this is definitely a 3-star movie at best. Which I
Okay,
think I
okay.
think is fair because I think 3 stars is a good enough rating to give it for the stuff that I do love in it, while also acknowledging that there is a lot of stuff in that
Yeah,
that
like
is flawed.
there was a lot of good, but it was like really at the end of the day it was just okay, you know? It
Yeah. Like,
was
it was one of those movies that it's good for all the stuff that I love, but there's plenty in there that makes you sit there and go, "Ugh, not so much."
this worked out though. I'm glad
So,
6. I feel
I
like
would agree,
we
yeah,
landed right where we should
yeah.
have landed. We're
So
like
that
better than
gives
Rugrats by a lot, but
yep. That gives Star Wars Episode 1 an overall ranking of 6, which puts it in the number 3 spot, right behind Titanic and The Lost World, but ahead of
so
Pokemon and the Rugrats.
and Titanic I think we gave a perfect score, right?
Yeah, Titanic, the only
And
movie so
then
far to have a perfect score.
Jurassic World got what, like a seven and a half or
Seven,
something?
yeah, 7.5. So we're slowly starting to draw the battlefield here. We got
Yeah,
Star Wars with a
definitely.
6, Pokemon with a 5, Rugrats with a 4. So
I'm pretty happy with it so far. I think give it a couple more weeks and I think it's gonna start to get ugly, but I'm
every
pretty happy with it so far.
every week Jim's gonna be sitting there waiting for the movie that's gonna break the camel's
It's dude,
back
it's
and be
giving me
like
anxiety, man. It's giving me anxiety. I just want us to land on the right score so bad.
like we're gonna get to that movie that like we want to be like, oh no, it's the same as Rugrats. Like, what have we done?
Yeah, right. The second the whole rating system loses all integrity. That's like,
Well, so far we've managed to avoid disaster for another week, and the ranking list is staying strong. But we will see come next week if we will be able to continue and keep that ranking list up high. Jim, do you have any idea what the movie is for next week? Do you want a hint? Do you want to guess?
yeah, sure. Give me a hint. Give me a
All
hint.
right,
But I
I'll
mean,
give
it's
you.
probably what like early 2000, right?
Yeah, so
Because
we are
was
firmly
this a Christmas
leaving.
movie?
We are firmly leaving 1999 behind now, and we are entering in to the 2000s, baby. We're starting with 2000, and I'll give you the hint. Obviously, I'm going to give you the great line of dialogue, but I think it's going to give it away for you. But here
Okay.
we go. The quote for next week's movie is, "But Commodus is not a moral man."
What?
Oh, I might have still stumped
Wait, say
him.
it. Say it one more time.
Commodus is not a moral man.
Oh, is it what I think it is? Is it Gladiator?
Oh, you bet your sweet ass it is.
Yes.
That's
Dude, oh
right.
my God.
For our next week's episode, we will be diving into Gladiator, which, if you think about it, came out
Wow.
in 2000. I was 10 years old. That's a wild movie for Big Rob to take me to see in theaters.
Oh, I saw this in theaters. I definitely saw this in theaters with my dad for sure. Yeah.
Which is great. God bless the dads out there that take their
Pretty
kids to
wild movie to
movies.
take a 10
Yeah,
year old to. Yeah.
take their kids to movies way earlier than they should because
The
Gladiator.
90s were a much different time, my
Yeah,
friend.
much different time. Yeah, right. Like my sisters would never take their kids to like at 10 to see a movie like Gladiator. Like
Yeah. Hardcore movie, dude. Yeah.
hardcore
I'm
movie.
so
Yeah, right.
excited.
It's
This
gonna
might
be
be my
great.
favorite one that we've done yet.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's gonna be good. Now that we're moving into the
Oh, and we're gonna
2000s and
we're gonna get to talk about the Gladiator sequel that was never to be.
oh my, yeah, talk about the one that was never to be and talk about the one that they actually are making now. So
Yeah,
we'll have
yeah.
a lot to talk about come next week with Gladiator. So make sure you join us back here next week where we dive into all the good stuff here for Gladiator. Jim, do you have anything left for the people before we sign out?
No, I was gonna say a stupid pod racing quote, but I lost. I gotta remember it.
He's got nothing. But all
What
right,
does he say? This is pod racing.
this is pod racing. This episode has been pod racing. That is for damn sure. But that'll do it for all of us here at Front Row Cinema this week. Until next time, we'll see you at the movies.